Hi there, and welcome back to Awareness, Fostering a More Compassionate, Empathetic, and Accepting Society. I'm your host, Rob Daniels. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast. That would be super meaningful. You can watch on YouTube, like, subscribe there. Gain the following on this podcast or wherever you get your podcast. Feel free to share it. That would certainly be appreciated. Now, today we're stepping actually into a world most of us will thankfully never experience firsthand. I'm talking a world of urgent moments, like critical decision making and the profound human stories that unfold at 5,000 feet in the air. So, my guest has spent a career with Ornge Air Ambulance, one of the most vital emergency medical services in the province of Ontario. Now, they've responded to people on their worst days, worked inside high stakes situations, and carried the emotional weight that comes with seeing the fragility and the resilience of human life up close. Now, in this conversation, we're not just going to explore the technical side of air ambulance service. We're diving into the humanity part of it too, the pressure, the purpose, the personal cost, and of course, the moments that changed everything. So settle in. Feel free to take a deep breath. I know I will. And out. All right. And join me for this powerful conversation as I welcome Dave Chops Phillips to the show. Thank you so much for being here and spending some time with us, Dave.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, you're most welcome. And thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So, you, of course, were a helicopter EMS pilot for the Ontario Air Ambulance, now known as Ornge. We're going to discuss service on this episode, courage, and really what it means to show up when it matters most. Okay, so to start, why don't you introduce yourself? Share what your role exactly was with Ornge Air Ambulance.
Well, again, thank you so much for having me on your episode. So my role was an EMS helicopter pilot. For those that maybe don't know, the helicopter service in Ontario is provided obviously all over the province. There's several bases. They have helicopter, fixed wing, and we actually had land ambulance assets as well. As you mentioned, it really is for the most critical patients in the province, so they get the best outcome possible. So my main role was to pilot the aircraft. We had crews of 4 that we flew with, so there'd be 2 pilots up front and then 2 critical care paramedics in the back. So our main role really was to fly the aircraft, navigate, and communicate. But also, when we landed on the ground, the non-flying pilot would be there to actually be an extra set of hands. So throughout my tenure with Ornge, I performed other duties, obviously, other than just flying the aircraft. So we would do things like carry their bags, their supplies, their kit, that sort of thing. I performed CPR a couple of times. Some things like carrying blood and unfortunately limbs at some point for certain accidents and that sort of thing. So it was a pretty exciting career for sure.
Oh, I would imagine. I'm sure rewarding and probably traumatizing at times too, as you were just mentioning there with carrying limbs and such. You're seeing the worst of the worst, but on some forms and types of days you probably felt it was very rewarding too, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a huge balance as to kind of where my career ended up and what happened to me. But yeah, when I got hired in 2001, it was other than the birth of my daughter, probably the greatest day of my life. I was over the moon. I got my license to fly the air ambulance. That's really what I wanted to do with my helicopter license.
So, but what was it that initially inspired you to pursue a career in air ambulance service? Was it something you always saw yourself doing?
I'm not necessarily flying helicopters are, to be honest with you, that really wasn't my first sort of like love or passion. I really wanted to be a police officer like my father. My dad kind of steered me away from that career, and they wanted me to go to a traditional kind of like university or college. I wasn't a very good, academic person per se.
Mhm.
So, I tried to go to college. It really wasn't for me. And then I asked my dad, I think I would really like to have a kick at the cat going at, trying to be a police officer. And he really kind of discouraged me from doing that. And then
Yeah.
I just had a calling to try to want to do something, to serve a purpose, to kind of serve my community,
Right.
either, serve my country, do something like that, just to give back. And, I really did a search and found that this would be a way to do that. And it, to be honest with you, it sounded like it would be pretty cool. So
Yeah.
I had to end up doing it.
There you go. For people who may not know the inner workings per se, what does a typical shift look like for someone working with Ornge?
So they're 12-hour shifts like most first responders.
Yeah.
Works on a, similar schedule to most, we had a little bit of a different schedule, but mainly it was, 2 day shifts, 2 night shifts, 12 hours. Yeah. You work with pretty much the same crews. There's a little bit of turnover, with vacations and that sort of thing. So you get to be pretty tight with the crews that you fly with, which is really good. Over the years I've flown with some really, great crews, had some great friends. And it really is just kind of, you would go in, you check out the helicopter for the pilots. We would check out the helicopter, make sure that it was, good for the day, airworthy is what we would call it. And the medics would check out all their equipment, make sure they had everything. And then once we were ready to go, we'd sign in with our dispatch and say that, we were ready to receive calls. And it was really a sit around and kind of wait sort of thing. Some days were really busy. Other days, they weren't, the calls just didn't come.
Yeah.
The calls really, when they did come in, they're based on, for us to accept a call, to go on a call, they're based on weather. We don't get any patient details. So if the weather's good, then we patch over rather to the medics, and they take all the call details, and we get the coordinates and we head out.
So those 12-hour shifts, did you say you would have them 3 times per week, or was it 2?
So yeah, we would work a mix kind of combination of like 2 on, 2 off. So you'd be working four shifts. So 2 day shifts, 2 night shifts. Then you'd have 4 days off, and then you'd go. We actually worked a rotation where we did 3 and 3 kind of mixed in. So we worked 3 days, 3 nights. And then we'd have 4 off, and then we'd be back at it. Yeah. And in the summertime, we were extremely busy.
That's got to be tough on the body, though. Right?
Yeah, tough on the body, and certainly, as I found out, tough on the mind. Yeah,
on the
for
mind.
sure. Yeah,
absolutely. So, what surprised you most when you first started working in air ambulance? Was it something the public rarely sees or understands?
Yeah, for me, I really, I kind of knew what I signed up for. Obviously, with the air ambulance, it's, you kind of know what you're getting into. You realize that you're not, carrying around just cargo or whatever, that there's, human life really is, in the balance of kind of what we do. Right. So, I did realize what we signed up for. I didn't realize the emotional toll that it would take on me over the years. The kind of, the TV type of drama stuff. As odd as it sounds, sometimes you get a little bit accustomed to it.
Yeah.
We live in such a rapid, chaotic world that you really didn't have time for it really to kind of sink in. All that really came in the quiet. That's when the darkness and the loudest times were when you were alone at home. That's really when you really start to think about things that you did for the day, because we're such a limited resource and asset that we don't have that luxury of taking time out and taking a helicopter offline just because someone's not good to go type of idea. It was really a self kind of check, and no one's going to say no, because no one wants to downstaff the aircraft. So we would do 2 or 3 sometimes calls in a shift, so back to back. And as you said at the beginning, we did do some transfers, But most of the stuff that we did was, like traumatic calls.
What does teamwork look like at 5,000 feet in the air during a critical call?
It's everything. It's we take special courses in order to make sure that we have crew resource management, locked down, because everybody is very vital to the success or the failure of the outcome of a patient, right? So that's why it's very important to make sure that the front and the back are talking, communicating properly, as well as, we're communicating with dispatch. Dispatch is, sometimes talking to crews on the ground, fire, police. So it's very chaotic, right? I flew out of Toronto, so not only that, now we're dealing with air traffic control. So we have to make sure that, we're not interfering with, planes coming in and out of Pearson, that sort of thing. If we're doing a call in that area, or trying to get from downtown Toronto and get out and go into the north and stuff like that, we want to expedite and make sure that we get there. So we want to make sure that, we're just, everybody's like on the same page and clicking. So teamwork is everything. Absolutely everything.
That's where you reported to then. It was Billy Bishop every shift?
Yeah. Went down to the island every shift. Yeah. And it was before they actually had the tunnel and all that. So we had to actually get there early and hop on a ferry and take the ferry over to the island. Yeah. It was a bit of an ordeal for sure.
So are there certain boundaries of where you can fly for certain accidents that take place? Is it just all of Ontario, or there's other bases, say in like Kingston or Ottawa, or do you have just like a parameter of where you're going to fly to if in an emergency case scenario, or is it all over the province?
Yeah. So we like, as I mentioned, there's several bases. So okay. There's a base in Toronto, there's one in London, one in Ottawa, Thunder Bay, and a helicopter up in Moosonee.
Okay.
So the Toronto base actually had 2 helicopters. So we did a lot of overlap. Sorry. And there's also one in Sudbury. So we did a lot of overlap with Sudbury and Ottawa and London.
Yeah.
Because we had 2, they would kind of shift us around and move us around. So we could respond to a call one way, as far as, we could go all the way up to Ottawa and go to Sudbury, and then we'd have to refuel to come back, that sort of thing. So sometimes what would happen is we would get called to a call, let's say in kind of the Ottawa catchment area, and we would be in there already on a call. Then Ottawa would get called and they would get pushed into the Toronto area. So now all of a sudden you're in Ottawa and you're doing Ottawa's calls. Wow. And they're doing your calls, and there was a little bit of overlap in that. So it could get a little bit hectic in that regard for sure.
Gotcha. Now, can you walk us through a moment where you may have felt the stakes were incredibly high? Like what was going through your mind in a scenario like this, if you can think of one?
Yeah, there's just on an aviation type of scenario that I personally had. We had a late scene call coming in the summertime, and we had just transitioned to the new airframe that we had, the AW139. So we were really getting familiar with the airframe itself, and it was a very advanced helicopter. So it had a caution system down on the right hand side, and we had actually had one of the messages kept on coming up all day, and we kept on clearing it and getting the medics to check it, because it was a door. It said that the door wasn't locked, basically, in the back cabin, and but they would double check it, and it was. And so we kind of went out through the day with it. We landed. We got the engineer to take a look at it when we landed, and they said, "Nah, all it is, it's just this little pin, and it's not touching the sensor properly. It's fine." So they just said you just have to give it a good slam and make sure that the door's locked properly.
Right.
So as I mentioned, we did a late call, and we were getting ready actually to transfer over to the night crew, but the night crew wasn't really ready yet. So we decided for the sake of the patient and trying to get out the door as quick as possible, that the day crew would take it, but we took the night medics with us instead. So we broke up the crew, which we normally didn't do. Mm-hmm. And so then those medics weren't really aware of the situation in the back. And as we taxied out, we rolled out and saw the cast. We told them, check the door, make sure it's locked. we got the thumbs up. Yeah, it's locked. And as we took off, we went, and all of a sudden we heard this huge like thud, and the aft left door had come all the way back. And
Oh my gosh.
it was hanging on by like a little teeny piece of metal. And the medics
Wow.
called up, and they were in a panic. And we ended up calling a pan, which is just short of instead of calling a mayday, it's a pan. And we went around, and we ended up landing in a field on the shoreline. And when we got out, we realized that it was like just this little teeny piece of metal holding on the door. And if the door would have went off, it would have went through the tail rotor, and it more than likely would have taken us all out. So that was a pretty exciting moment in my career.
Oh my gosh. Like
Yeah.
and you were flying at that point. Like you were the one flying the helicopter.
Yeah, so we flew in cruise too. That day I actually wasn't. I was the non-flying pilot. I was the one that was doing the
like
communicating. Yeah, the communication and the navigation and whatnot. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was a crazy day.
That is chaos. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I mean, and dealing with this, how do you stay calm when you're literally flying into chaos? What do you do to stay calm?
It's just your training kicks in. The company does an amazing job of training. They send all the pilots go down to flight safety in the United States, and you fly for 7 days in a simulator, and they put you through a ton of scenarios.
Wow.
Everything from engine failures to dual engine failures to cockpit failures, fires, all sorts of good stuff. And so your training really just kind of kicks in, and you just it's muscle memory. You do what you're told, and it goes back to the communication, right? Communication and that role is really key, right? Making sure that you know what you're doing, what your role is, what your job is, that you don't try to kind of cross-pollinate each other and mess each other up. The guy that's doing the communication does the communicating. The guy that flying the aircraft flies the aircraft. And the result is the way that it was, a nice safe landing. So it's all training. That's really what it is.
So yeah, you had mentioned that you dropped out of college, but you did this as sort of your post-secondary schooling,
Right.
is to train for.
Yeah.
So how long was it? Was a 7-day course, or was there written material too that you had to pass?
Yeah. So to get your helicopter license, like your commercial helicopter license, that's took about a year to get it. It really is dependent on, again, everything's dependent in aviation on weather. So I was really fortunate that I had great weather the year that I did it, and I did my course in about 8 months.
Yeah.
And then every year the company that I did my course through, they hired one of their students every year, and I was lucky enough to get chosen as the guy that they hired. I certainly I'm not ashamed to admit that I definitely wasn't the best pilot out of the crew of 8 that went through the training that year.
Okay.
But I was at a different stage in my life, and it came down to what they said. It was my work ethic, right? I was eager to be successful in this career, and so it turned out in my benefit with that work ethic. So and to get on the air ambulance, you need a few other things. You need a IFR rating, you need a night rating, you need an ATPL rating. So these are all things that you have to get once you accumulate a little bit of time in a helicopter. So they normally take guys, the minimum amount of time to get on the ambulance is 500 hours, but they try to press to get guys that have at least 1,000 hours flight time. So that's kind of what they look for. And then once you get on the ambulance, then you have to do what's called a type rating and a PPC. You have to do one of those every year. And that involves a check ride. So that's the 7-day course that I mentioned that every pilot on the air ambulance has to do every single year.
Yeah. Did you ever experience moments that changed your outlook on life?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's really kind of where I am today, and and what I'm doing in my life. It definitely I wouldn't wish my PTSD on my worst enemy, but it's definitely given me a different view on life, PTSD definitely makes you view the world through a different lens for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I've definitely a changed human being for sure.
Do you think it was that story about that emergency landing you had to make? Was that what triggered your PTSD, or was it more of a severe scenario that you saw?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't. That was just an emergency. That definitely really, I don't think, had anything to do necessarily with my PTSD. My PTSD definitely stems from, the traumatic incidents that took place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So working in emergency medicine, especially in aviation, it comes with this emotional weight that you speak of, the PTSD as a consequence. How else did the job impact your mental health?
It's a great question. I think it made me aware of mental health, to be honest with you. I mean, I think like most, certainly men, I knew what I was, like I said, I knew what I was signing up for. And I thought I was, physically capable. And I just assumed that being physically capable meant that I was like mentally, capable as well. I didn't realize, the mental fortitude and whatnot that it really does take, the emotional impact and the toll that it took on me personally. So yeah, it definitely is. It definitely has changed my outlook and the way that I view mental health for sure. Yeah.
So once that became, once that came into your awareness that mental health was a big part of it, and you kept going with the job for however long you did with it, what kinds of coping strategies did you develop over the years?
So when I was first on the ambulance, I started to struggle with the things that I was starting to see. Unfortunately, I never, like most people, I was ashamed of it. So I never really spoke of it. And on the aviation side, we're really, we're tied to our aviation medical. So if we lose our aviation medical, we lose our ability to fly essentially. So, every year when you go to get your medical done, you really are, not really forthcoming. In my particular, I wasn't really forthcoming with everything that was going on because I was really worried about losing my medical. I wasn't about to tell him that I was struggling, mentally. I wasn't about to tell him that, my coping mechanisms were, having to have a drink to go to sleep and that sort of thing. Right.
Yeah.
So I really developed early on some really bad coping mechanisms, like a lot of first responders. And, the most accessible is alcohol. So, in order to get to sleep and to forget about things that were going on, to get rid of the demons in the darkness, really, it came down to like drinking and that's the way I would fall asleep and, was passing out basically. Right. It wasn't till I couldn't really take it anymore after, I did a really bad call. And I was just like, enough is enough. My cup was full and I went into the hangar and I broke out and, and I ended up calling the chief pilot, said, hey, I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore. I need professional help. We had a helpline that I called, like a 1-800 helpline, something similar to Boots on the Ground. And that's how it started. And that was really the beginning of kind of like my mental health kind of journey. But even then, to be honest with you, I mean, I only did, I think I did like 4 sessions with a therapist and really scratched the surface and didn't really dive deep into really what was going on. I just was kind of giving them a little bit of what I was feeling. Cause again, there's that shame that is associated with mental health and, the weakness kind of that I felt on myself. And so I ended up trying to go back. And I did about 4 months, I think. And then I decided I was going to retire from the front line and stop flying. So, yeah, and that was in 2018. but unfortunately, because I didn't address my PTSD and what I saw, it ended up getting worse. So, yeah.
And you talked to me a little bit about, you mentioned this word ashamed when you saw some incidents, or every time you would get to a call, you would feel shame. What was that about? Shame about what you saw or how you felt? What, I'm a little confused on that. Can you maybe shed some light on that in regards to the shame?
Yeah, sure. So it just in the ability, I guess, not to cope properly with what I was, what I was dealing with,
See.
essentially, right?
Okay.
So there's shame built into, not feeling that you're tough enough to finish the job that you signed up for, right? So there's that shame that comes with PTSD, and not wanting to share what was going on. I mean, I didn't talk to anybody about it until
Mhm.
I decided to put up my hand and say, enough is enough, type of thing, right? So I
Right.
kept all that inside. So that was really, really difficult to do. Yeah. So there was this sense of, being lost and just not knowing what to do and where to go and who to talk to, if there was anybody to talk to. And, thoughts like, why is this me? And if I just, ignore it, it'll go away. And it just never did. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And, that sense of shame that I talked about really kind of relates to sometimes where I am today, in my life, because I wasn't able to finish the job on my own terms. I really, I had hoped to, finish my career flying, and I didn't do that. I ended up having to take an office role. And like I said, the PTSD, my assumption was if I remove myself from the front line, that the PTSD would kind of eventually go away. And it never did. Like I said, it got worse rather than better. So yeah, there's a bit of that, that shame comes from, not being able to finish the role the way you wanted it to, really.
I think that's more associated with the ego. Like if we remove the ego of like we feel like we, and I know, and it's hard to put myself in your shoes because that's it. It's something that's so close to you. But I think and it's, and doing this is your purpose. But if I could turn it any means into a positive thought for you, is that you served all those years. Because if I'm correct, it's a couple of decades you did, didn't you? 15 years.
Yeah, I was 2001 to 2018. Yeah.
Yeah, so you like, yeah, like a good 17, 18 years of, and not many people at all can say that you served that type of purpose for that long, and the most meaningful type of work possible for saving lives. So you did tremendous. So just, you should, I know it's easier said than done. Not be so hard on yourself, because I'm hard on myself too. I think of everything you must have seen and gone through, and that's to put yourself on the line and be so selfless. And it's almost like being like well, see, I'm a I revert things back to baseball because I'm such a baseball guy. But like, a pitcher that doesn't go out on his terms, and he's got like 15 years in the big leagues, who can say they've pitched like 15 years in Major League Baseball, but they never went out on their own terms. And but yours is a much more deeper, meaningful purpose, and what the world needs more of is helping others, and in a deeper, meaningful way. Sports and entertainment is a separate bracket, but what you did is nothing short of incredible. So you should certainly be proud of everything you've accomplished in that regard. So
Uh, I really appreciate that. That's really part of, the therapy that I go to, right?
yeah,
It's just finding that sense of purpose, because it's a loss really of identity, right, for us.
yeah. And it's like,
Um,
what else can you do
yeah,
that is just as purposeful, or will make the brain feel
yeah,
like it's doing the right thing? And
yeah,
I got to ask though, because when you were doing this, it may have not just been the alcohol, but the alcohol is one thing, but everyone's got a life typically outside of work, or they try to
right.
have a life. Like, how did it affect your personal relationships going through the PTSD and such, or coming home on those deep dark nights where you needed more than one drink?
Yeah, it really, ended up, destroying a lot of friendships and, the marriage in the end. And yeah, it's a pretty destructive injury, and
Injury.
it's,
Yeah.
the sad thing about it is it's not something that you can look at someone and say, oh, this person's struggling, or, it's not a broken arm, or you can say, it's,
Yeah.
it's going to heal in 6 months. It's, it's not linear. Right. And it just, over time, it really just kind of, like I said earlier, it got worse. And, the people around me that, love me, were trying to help, but, it's tough for them to understand, right? It's one of those things you don't know unless you know, and unfortunately, I know, and it brought me to a really dark place where I didn't want to be alive anymore, and that was pretty much the worst that it got, and it was kind of like the defining moment that a lot of people were like, all right, we're out. You need help. You need more than what you're doing, and that sort of thing, right? So,
Yeah.
it was a bit of an eye opener to say, okay, it's time to really, dig deep and do the work that's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your terms of your career there,
Mm-hmm.
is there a patient or a moment that still stays with you to this day?
Yeah, I have, with my therapist, we go, through memories. So we're trying to clear memories. I do a modality called, EMDR, and,
Yeah.
it's a really powerful modality. It's very painful to do, meaning that it takes a lot of emotional strength in order to get through it.
Right.
It's exhausting. You're just exhausted after it. But it's a fantastic modality because what it's doing is it's helped, um, rewrite the narrative of the calls that I went on.
Yeah.
So we always say that you remember your first and your worst. So we're not quite at my worst yet. We haven't really cleared that memory, but we've cleared a few, and it's given me the ability to kind of look at those calls in a different light, which is, it's been, really good and powerful for me. So, but yeah, those memories, they're still there. I still get nightmares about certain calls. Unfortunately, most of them involve the worst ones always involve children. And when you're a father, it's,
Yeah. Gut
you know,
wrenching.
yeah, it makes those calls even worse. Right. So yeah, I'm a work in progress still, but we're getting there.
So, okay. So speaking of that, then therapy is like an ongoing thing for you. Is the thing you check in
Yeah.
once a year or weekly?
No, I go to therapy twice a week. So
Twice.
right
Okay.
now I have my regular therapist. I've, been with her for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
I do a 16-week assessment with a kind of like a board of 3 or 4 different doctors and
Yeah.
psychotherapists and whatnot, just to make sure that, I'm on a good progress. I've done group therapy. I have an occupational therapist that's helping me with exposure therapy now. I'm also on certain medications, to help me sleep and that sort of thing as well. So yeah, it's ongoing.
From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges facing emergency medical services in Ontario today?
It's a great question. I think, honestly, and, I can only speak really for like what I did in the area ambulance, um, but aviation in general.
Yeah.
Aviation is, really not it doesn't seem to be like a sought out profession, right, for the younger generation coming up. And so, um, we don't really see, um, people wanting to get into doing the type of jobs, that we're doing, just because of, the way that the pay is and what you're exposed to and that sort of thing, right? You really have to be, I think, a certain individual to kind of volunteer to do these sort of things, to be, an acting service member or police or fire or this sort of thing, right? It's, really does take a certain individual. And I think that, hopefully something changes. And, we see some young people get a little bit more excited about aviation. I mean, when I was younger, I I did love aviation. It wasn't something that I necessarily was like, yeah, that's what I want to do for a career, but I did have a love for aviation. Those were the days when you used to be able to go up to the front cockpit and, sit in the jump seat and sit in landing, watch the pilots land and that sort of thing. Right. So
Yeah.
I really think that the love of aviation is kind of lost, and that's really, trickled down to what I said earlier. Now we're just, now it's just a service to kind of, herd cattle around.
Yeah.
Right.
True. Yeah.
So
what do you wish the public understood better about the work you and your colleagues do or did?
Hit me with all these great hard questions.
It's just trying to get the most awareness out of you possible to try and see what you went through, what the world needs more of, help,
yeah,
creative ways of innovating.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the public really needs to know what an amazing service, if they don't already, how fortunate we are in Ontario. Such an amazing service that, the men and women do, day in and day out, to provide, the care that is required, for everybody, to make sure that there's equality across the province. It's amazing. And a lot of the work, goes unseen. So, there's a lot, to put a helicopter or a plane or a land rig on the street and on the scene, right? There's a lot of moving parts, and to get somebody from A to B. I think a lot more than what people think. A lot of times, the crew, meaning the pilots and the paramedics, get a lot of the praise and the thank yous, but there's the unsung heroes that keep the helicopters flying and the airplanes flying and that sort of thing. And those are the engineers. They work the long hours just like we do, and their job sometimes is thankless, right? So there's a lot that goes on. Yeah, shout out to them for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it's all across, the province of Ontario. So a lot goes into, to a 1 hour call.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we call, it's the golden hour, in order to make sure that someone's got the, the best possibility of survival is, getting them to a hospital, to a trauma center in an hour. So a lot that goes into that, behind the scenes. So kudos to that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Looking back on your career with Ornge,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say you're most proud of?
Actually, I think one of the things that I got the opportunity to do was meet Pope John Paul when he came for World Youth Day.
Yeah.
So there was a small group of us. There was only 80 of us. I'm not really a religious man at all, but it was pretty awesome. I got blessed by the Pope, and there was only 80 of us in that room that day. And I got an autographed picture of the Pope, blessing my hand, kissing my hand. And I got two medallions from the Vatican, and it's a Vatican stamp picture. So that was pretty cool. Pretty cool day. Yeah.
Very good. Now, what advice would you give to someone considering this line of work that you worked in for these 17, 18 years, especially in a world that's increasingly stressful? What advice would you give to someone considering this line of work?
I definitely would say, from the aviation perspective, if somebody came up to me and said, I want to get into flying and that sort of thing, if I was going to do it all over again, I probably would have went the military route. And I probably would have, me personally, I would have liked to serve my country. And the great part about that, as well as, you get an education on top of it. So from the aviation standpoint, I think I would rather have done that. From the emergency side of it, would say have a baseline, a mental health baseline, kind of find out where you're at. So, when you dip down and have somebody on standby, whether it's a friend or, loved one, whoever it is, or therapist, to have someone to actually start to talk right at the very beginning. I think for me, if I would have had somebody that I felt I could have shared what was going on, I probably would have been able to finish out my career.
Mm-hmm.
I really wish I had that resource So I encourage everybody that's getting into the emergency services to have that, to, kind of start therapy, honestly, like right away. You don't have to be, diagnosed with PTSD to go, right? You're getting into a service where you're going to see stuff. So you might as well realize it and get
and
help
just,
right away.
Right away.
Absolutely.
That's good advice. Advice for sure. And it's not the first I've heard it. Actually, there was a police officer on our on one of the episodes that we had, and he mentioned the same thing. When you get into these types of lines of work, when you see a lot of traumatic things, you gotta just sort of understand that you are going into that, and you just need to talk it out, just and that's certainly some great advice. Finally, what does awareness mean to Dave, to you, after a career spent responding to people on the worst day of their lives?
Awareness means, for me, definitely where I sit today is being aware that, because I'm involved so much in the mental health community, that mental health has very different, I'm going to say, views, and different, it's different for everybody. I was fortunate enough to go to a PTSD group that wasn't first responders. It was the first time ever. And it really opened my eyes to the different sort of trauma and dealings that people have. One of the fortunate things about being a first responder is most of us have benefits and that sort of thing. There's a lot of people that are struggling, that are left struggling on their own because they're waiting in queues, with our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And the worst part about mental health is mental health that is not diagnosed properly and left alone.
Right.
Because then that's when you start going into the dark places. And once you go there, that leads to suicide. And I'm very aware now how connected mental health and suicide are. And it is becoming, unfortunately, an epidemic where people are struggling and they figure that they have no way out and they're all alone. And so they just decide to take their life. And I think it's one of the saddest things. I think, we could all try to be a little bit kinder to one another. It costs us nothing, right? So
100%.
It definitely has given me that view on the world for sure.
How did you get the nickname Chops?
I'm flying helicopters.
Okay, so that's it. Choppers. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. My buddy Willie.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
He's a baseball guy, and
is
everybody.
He?
Yeah, he's 100%. He's a baseball guy, and
hopefully a Blue Jays fan.
Yeah, he is. He's a fantastic guy, and I met him and all his buddies. He's got all these buddies, and they all had nicknames, and I didn't have one. And he's like, "You're Chops." There was already a chopper, so I'm Chops, and it's stuck. It's tattooed on my arm. That's me, Chops.
Amazing. Can we see that tattoo quick before we? Let's see. Chops.
Chops. It's on there somewhere.
There we go. It's in there. Yeah, there it is. I see it. Yeah, on the midway through the arm. There you go. Chops. Thank you, Dave Chops Phillips, Helicopter EMS pilot for the Ontario Air Ambulance, now known as Ornge, for joining us for this episode of Awareness. Dave, conversations like these, they remind us that behind every siren, every helicopter liftoff, every emergency call, there are human beings, skilled, compassionate professionals doing their best to save lives while carrying their own emotional stories as well. So to our guest, thank you for your honesty, your service, Dave, and your willingness to take us inside a world few of us see, but many of us rely on.
Thank you so much again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, if you're most welcome, if today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. And as always, thank you for helping us build a more compassionate, empathetic, and accepting society, one conversation at a time. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For producer Mike, I'm Rob Daniels. We'll see you in the next episode.